With Christmas near, we're mindful of trees. Part of the Farm Bill contains a forestry provision that pays for, among other things, reducing the fuel that threatens towns, local industries, and lives. How do you manage a forest to ease firefighting? Should you? Here's Colleen Bradford Krantz.
8,500 firefighters from around the country worked in December of 2017 to battle Southern California's now infamous Thomas Fire. The blaze devastated nearly 282,000 acres to become the state's largest wildfire in modern history. Talbot Hayes, a Forest Service District Fire Management Officer from Alpine, California, traveled 200 miles north to join those battling the massive fire, which ultimately destroyed more than 1,000 homes and businesses, as well as taking 2 lives. A month later, Hayes returned home and continued his forest management work to simplify battling wildfires in his assigned district inside the Cleveland National Forest.
The time to fight tomorrow's fire is in the winter through prescribed burning and fuels management practices.
The almost automatic response to wildfires for decades had been to put them out immediately. Greater awareness of the positive and rejuvenating effects of natural fires in forest and prairie regions brought about a shift in strategies to allow fires in more remote areas of the country to burn longer. But in heavily populated regions where lives and buildings are at risk, Hayes says there are few such opportunities to just let it burn.
Well, down here in Southern California, the strategies pretty much stayed the same, and we try to suppress all fires due to the values at risk. The amount of people that live down here, the infrastructure in the area, doesn't allow to try to manage a fire. It's more full suppression. There are other regions that have a lot more wilderness and areas that are further away from values at risk, communities, and those areas can have slightly different strategies.
The 2018 fire season is expected to be a tough one, as many regions are already tinder dry. New Mexico and Colorado have already faced large catastrophic wildfires that broke out before the traditional start of the fire season.
We had engines that were sent to Colorado in March this year, which is very uncommon for Colorado to be having fires in March. We're not getting as much rain as we're used to getting. We're in a dry spell. Our local mountains aren't getting near the snowpack that they used to receive. And so the vegetation is a lot drier. The reservoirs don't have as much water. All this contributes to a busier, longer, more devastating fire season.
According to Hayes, most wildfires in Southern California are started by humans rather than by lightning. A spark from a dragging trailer chain or a mower hitting a rock may start a grass fire in the heat of summer.
Just be safe.
Jay Eyre, Cleveland National Forest campground host at Mile 26 on the Pacific Crest Trail, says hikers need to be aware of fire conditions and comply with fire prevention rules along the route. Campfires are prohibited outside designated campgrounds, and permits are required to use certain types of camp stoves along the 2,659-mile trail that runs from Mexico to just over the Canadian border.
They need to stop immediately if there's fire in the area.
Eyre, a retired school teacher from Montana, says his home state also had a rough fire season last year.
Last year was a big fire in western Montana mainly. A lot of Montana is in high fire danger just because of the climate change and the warm temperatures, lower snow levels we're seeing. And a few years ago there was a huge infest of bark beetles. So there's a lot of dead and down trees that are creating a lot of fuel to burn in Montana.
It's those kind of dead and downed trees, as well as forest undergrowth, that are particularly concerning for Hayes and his crews. Their answer is to cut and mow underbrush, create fire breaks, and use prescribed burns in certain high-risk areas.
We try to treat between 4,000 and 5,000 acres every winter through fuels management. Good fires do prevent bad fires.
Community defense breaks are typically 300-foot wide bands that create a barrier between the national forest and communities on its edge. It takes a crew of 20 several days to cut and gather the brush in these defense breaks. But Hayes says it increases the odds for successfully protecting a town if a wildfire reaches the area.
We try to cut out a lot of the vegetation, especially the dead vegetation and the more flammable vegetation, and in order to just reduce the intensity of the fire as it comes into the fuel break area to give us a better chance of actually stopping the fire.
The locations for prescribed burns are selected based on how much wood and vegetation, aka fuel, is present, as well as how long the area has gone without a fire. The hope is that taking away a portion of the fuel will reduce the intensity of any wildfires that do occur.
This side of the hand line that we're standing on has never been treated. It's never been prescribed burned or thinned in any way, and you can see the heavy accumulation of ground fuels, and you can see how devastating a wildfire in the summer would be if it were to start in this area. Now this side over here, this area was thinned, it was broadcast burned. If there were to be a wildfire start in this area, the fire would be very low intensity. We'd be able to get in here and keep the fire smaller.
The federal government reported it spent a record $2.9 billion on suppressing fires in 2017. And the outlook for the current year is bleak, as many regions are expected to become dangerously dry. Firefighters will continue their work to reduce the size of the fires that will inevitably happen this year.
It's not if, it's when we get the next fire.
For Market to Market, I'm Colleen Bradford Krantz.